Yeah, the neighbors heard all last night. Yeah. You were coming pretty well all night long. We heard in the morning, absolutely.
All right. Let's see if there's somebody else who's on already. Harvey, is that you? No, that's Steve, right?
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, good shape. Okay.
Okay. Another couple minutes and we'll get started. Oh, your device is running low on storage.
We know what we're going to be doing on Yantif?
Dave Cheslow is going to do the dance the next 2 days of Yontif.
Okay.
And then
When?
in the afternoon.
Okay.
So that's, hello? Okay. Looks like we're gonna have Kavusa, you and I, Jeff, all right? All right. We'll get started momentarily. First, the sponsors. I'm gonna shut the door though, as you hear all the noise from the outside. Okay. I don't know if Harvey's here or away. We'll see. Okay, Year of Learning by Suanarni Gerlich in memory of Malcolm Pearl Man and Philip Man. And Yisrael David ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Beryl ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch. Yosef Meir ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Henya Rivka Pro Rosna bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch. In memory of family murdered in the Holocaust. Harav Tzvi Hirsch ben Shlomo Yaakov, Sarah bat Ephraim, Yisrael David ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Ephraim ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Adia bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Miriam bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Pesel bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shalom ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shlomo Yaakov ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shmuel ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch. Marcia Federbush and family in memory of her husband, Dr. Uriel Paul Federbush, Uriel Pinchas ben Harav Shimon, Sharon and Fred Liska, their family and many friends, in memory of her dear mom, Harriet Friedman Edelbas Yaakov, Leslie and Gail Kaplan, in memory of their parents, Harry and Marjorie Sedell, Irving and Pearl Kaplan, friends of Avi Gitler, Avramea ben Shimon, and Martha Gitler, Charna bat Yeshaya, children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren of Toby Paris, Saratova bat Yisrael Dov in her memory, friends of Malka Levi, Malka bat Yosef, friends of Joe Wolf, Yosef ben Chaim, Charlie Gelfenstein and Sam Levine, in memory of Ramona Levine, Rachel Mata bat Asher. A Month of Learning by Lynn Rappaport, in memory of her husband, Avram ben Sion HaKohen. A Week of Learning by Jonas and Clara Weiser, in memory of his mother, Chaya bat Yona Yitzchak, by Robin Lerner, in memory of her father, Reuven ben Yosef, by Ari and Judy Cohen, in memory of his mother, Fega bat Yechiel, and her mother, Hinda bat Moshe Zechariah Halevi. Okay. Today is what, the 19th? 20th. So we also have a day of learning today by Corinne Greenwald, sorry, in memory of her mother-in-law, Esther bat Yehoshua Zelig, by Barbara and Bill Ganonsky, in memory of her mother, Bela Zorach Bas Halevi, by Fega and Shlomo Kleinbach, in memory of her father, Tzvi Hirsch ben Chaim Yosef. Shamas Heaven Aliyah, Kranka Rafia, Velti Yashir Shama Talia, and Lachol B'nai Yisrael, a good Gaben Shtia. Okay. Okay. All right, Steve, you're still with us? I Hope.
I am here.
Okay, I don't know if Harvey is there. All right, so,
Having trouble with my computer again, but the telephone connection is working, so.
okay. All right, I'm going to have us start. Okay, on the bottom of Yutet Amud Beis, it's about 4 or 5 lines up. Right? 4 or 5 lines up. V'yotzei ba mishum simcha ve'eno yotzei ba mishum chagiga. Okay? That part of the Mishnah that said one would fulfill the obligation of the offering for simcha, but not the holiday offering itself. Okay? And so the Gemara then, Pshita says the Gemara, that's obvious. Davar shebechovahu. That's an obligation, okay, also. And if it's one obligation, you can't fulfill a different obligation with the same animal. B'chol davar shebechovah eino ba'ela min hachulin. However, we say that something that comes to fulfill an obligation must come from an unconsecrated animal, not an animal that's already been consecrated for some other purpose. Right? Lo tzricha, says the Gemara. No, it was necessary to cite this in the Mishnah. Why? The afal gav the parish, because even if the person had specified that the one offering was ideally for 2 separate things, namely, for example, a Thanksgiving offering, okay, and a festival offering, okay, the obligation is not fulfilled.
The first one mentioned fulfilled.
Okay, in
Not
other
the
words, you can't fulfill the two different requirements with the same
I'm
animal.
saying the first one that comes out of your mouth, that's the one that's fulfilled.
That's the one that's fulfilled, right? Okay. Kedabae Mene Rabbi Shimon, as was asked by Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish mi Rabbi Yochanan. He asked Rabbi Yochanan the following shaila: HaOmer, one who says, Hare alai todah va'aitzei ba yedei chagiga, one who says, this animal is my Thanksgiving offering, but it also should be the means by which I fulfill the holiday offering. Hareini Nazir, or he says, I am going to be a Nazirite, ve'egaleach, and I will shave mimaot ma'aser sheni, based on the monies that come from bringing my ma'aser sheni. Again, that's another attempt to fulfill 2 requirements, okay, with the same item. Mahu, what's the status? Amarle, Rabbi Yochanan answered him, right? Nidor ve'eno yotzei. That is considered a voluntary offering, the Todah, and therefore you don't fulfill the Chagiga requirement. Or Nazir ve'eno megaleach. Okay, you remain a Nazir, and you cannot use the Maaser Sheni money to take care of that requirement, and therefore you cannot shave. Right? And that's where we're picking up today's daf on Kaf Amud Aleph, 2nd line, Hahu Gava. There was a certain person, the Amar Laho, okay, and they said to them, Havu le arba me'a zuzei leploni. And this person, since we're talking about conditional statements, okay, because when you try to do the combination of two obligations in one, it implies there's a condition there. So since we're talking about that, we're now giving another example where this person once said, okay, that here he says, I will give this man 400 zuz, leploni, to so-and-so, Vilinsiv Barte, and he may marry my daughter. Okay, so the shaila was asked of Rav Papa, Amar Rav Papa, Arba Mea Shkil Ubarte. Okay, he can take the 400 shkalim, and the daughter. Okay? Ibai, and as regards to the daughter, what Rav Papa said, Ibai Nasiv, if he wants to marry her, fine, so to speak. Ibai Lo Nasiv, if he doesn't want to marry her, he doesn't have to. Okay? What was the reasoning? Ta'ama Damar, what was the reasoning that he said this? Okay, Havu Leilin Ulanasiv. If he had combined them and said, here is for you the money and marry her, that's one thing. Aval Iyamar Linasiv Vahavule. If he said to marry her and here is the money, Inasiv Shakil. If he married her, then he would receive the money. He could take the money. Ve'ilo Nasiv. And if he didn't marry her, Lo Shakil. Then he can't take the money. Right? So that's
what.
what
To say both positive and negative.
he has to say both in a way so that one isn't. The question is one conditional on the other? Right? Okay. Another example. Yativ Merimar, v'ka'amar lahashma'ata mishmei denafshe. Merimar was sitting and he was repeating this particular lesson in his own name. Okay. Amarle Ravina, and Ravina responded to the Merimar the following: Atun hachi matnitula. Okay, you teach it in that manner. Anan kidba'ai mine reish lakish mi Rabbi Yochanan matnitula. We teach it as a question that was asked by Reish Lakish to Rabbi Yochanan, and that's how we teach the Mishnah. Okay? So interesting the point. Okay, there that the language of our Gemara towards the bottom of the previous Amud was closer to what Ravina was saying as to how it was taught. Okay, new piece from with a Braita. Tane Tana Kame de Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Abba. A Tana was teaching the following before Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Abba. He cites a pasuk, Vayekrev et ha'olah v'ya'aseha mikamishpat, right? That he offered the olah, the burnt offering, and made it according to the appropriate standard. Kamishpat, olat nidava. So the Gemara says that according to that standard, the burnt offering is a voluntary offering. Lamed al olat chova shetu'una smicha. Okay, this comes to teach us then that if it is a obligatory burnt offering, it is going to require laying on of hands. Amarle. So now what happens? Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Abba responds to the Tana and says to him, Da Amar lach mani. Okay. He said to him, so according to whom is this? Beit Shammai. This seems to be according to the view of Beit Shammai. De lo gamre shalmei chova mishalmei nidava. That they don't learn the standard practice of a shlomim that's obligatory from shlomim that are voluntary. De'i Beit Hillel, because were that statement that the Tana said based on the view of Beit Hillel, kevan de gamre shalmei chova mishalmei nidava, where they do learn the requirements or the practice of shlomim that are obligatory, okay, like shlomei chagiga. Okay, let's take that example on the holiday. That's an obligatory shlomim. Okay, they learned that from the shlomim of nedava. Okay, voluntary. So he then goes on and tells olat chova nami lo tabayikra. And if you're talking about an olah, that's an obligatory offering, there also we don't need a pasuk to explain the origin and the reason why, right? The gamre meolat medavar labriyut. Okay, because we learn that also from a burnt offering that's voluntary. My debate Hillel, and on what basis is it that Beit Hillel, we said, learned Shalmei Chovah Mishalmei Nidava Gamrei? What was the basis that they learned Shlomim for obligation from Shlomim Briot of that's voluntary? Dilma Me'olat Chovah Gamrei. Maybe they learned the obligation of Shlomim from the obligation of Olot. Maybe they learned it that way. V'olat chovah gufa ba'ikra. And we say that the obligation of bringing burnt offerings, that in and of itself did require a pasuk. Ma'ishna. So what then is unique or different? Mishalme nidava delo gamre. Okay, that how do we say then that he could have, Beit Hillel could have learned it from, obligatory olot rather than obligatory. So what's unique? I'm sorry, rather than voluntary shlamim, delo gamre, shekain mitzuyin, because there we find the following: meolat chova, nami lo gamre, shekain kalil. Why? Because they couldn't learn it from a obligatory burnt offering, right? That they can't learn it from because that is completely consumed. Okay. In other words, what do we have here? We have a situation where you have two different halachas that each have unique aspects. And so all you can do is take the common aspect from the two of them and use that to get a third halacha. That's what we're seeing here. Okay. So that's why. So that's what the Gemara is telling us. Acha mi beinaya. Okay, we're deriving it from what comes in between. In other words, from the one common factor of these two halachas to learn the third one. V'savrei Beit Shammai. And therefore, Beit Shammai is of the opinion, Shalmei Chovah, lo ba'u smicha. Does this seem to imply then that the shlamim that are obligatory, they don't require leaning on of hands? Vahatanya. But aren't we taught elsewhere in a Braita? Amar Rabbi Yossi, says Rabbi Yossi, lo nichlaku Beit Shammai u Beit Hillel al hasmicha atzma shetzarich, okay, that Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai are not in disagreement on the leaning on of hands, that it's required. Al ma nechlaku, what do they disagree on then? Al techef l'smicha shechita, on the proximity, I'm going to translate it, between the laying on of hands and the actual slaughter of the animal. Namely, says the Gemara, Shebeit Shammai omrim eino tzarich, that Beit Shammai says it's not necessary to have immediate proximity between laying on of hands and the slaughter. Beit Hillel omrim, but Beit Hillel, however, says tzarich, that you do need immediate proximity. Okay.
It has to be done on the festival itself.
That would be the case, exactly. You heard that, Zev, right? That Steve's point is that would seem to help us understand why Beit Hillel says that you do smicha and the slaughter on the yontif itself.
What did you say actually?
That you do the, right? That you do the smicha followed immediately by the shechita, and therefore it has to be done on the holiday, on the yontif. Okay. Right, so what do we see here? Who de Amar, this is what he said, Ki hai Tana, like the following Tana, the Tanya, who taught as follows, right? Amar Rabbi Yossi ba Rabbi Yehuda. Says Rabbi Yossi ba Rabbi Yehuda, Lo nichlaku Beit Shammai u Beit Hillel al techef l'smicha shchita shetzarich. That Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai didn't disagree on the necessity to have immediate proximity between laying on of hands and the slaughter, that was required. Al manech laku, al smicha atzma. He said, no, on the laying of hands itself is where they disagree. Shebeit Shammai omrim, that Beit Shammai says, no tzarich, that it's not required. Ubeit Hillel omrim tzarich, and Beit Hillel says it was required. So we see two different teachings here as to what their machloket was, whether it was on the issue of smicha itself or whether it was on the proximity of smicha to shchita as ways of defining their earlier machloket. Okay, let's go now to a new Braita. Tanu Rabbanan, Maaseh Behillel Hazaken. So now we have in this Braita a story about an incident where Hillel the elder, right, Shehivi olato la'azara, lismoch aleh, that he brought his offering, the animal that would be a burnt offering, which is usually a male animal, okay, to the temple compound, right, in order to lay his hands on it on Yom Tov. And what happened? Chibru alav talmidei Shammai hazakim, and they're gathered around him a number of Shammai students. Okay, Amrulo, and they said to him, Mati vashel behemazo, what kind of an animal is this that you're bringing here? And what did Hillel Hazaken do? Amar lehem, he said to them, Nekevahi l'zivchei shlamim avetiha. Okay, right? Namely, he fibbed, right? And he told them this is a female animal, and I brought it for a shlamim offering. Okay,
and they waved his tail.
that's what did he do? Hillel Hazaken, kishkesh lahem biznava v'halchu lahem. He basically moved the tail. He shoved the tail back and forth of the animal so they wouldn't see what genitals it had, and therefore they left him. Va'oto hayom, says the Gemara with another story, Gavra yadam shel Beit Shammai al Beit Hillel. That day, the students of Shammai had the upper hand. I'll use that expression, okay? Over the Academy of Hillel, ubikshu likboa halacha kimota, and they wanted to establish the law according to their view. But what happened, says the Gemara? V'hayasham zaken echad mitalmidei Shammai hazaken, and there was an elder there, one of the older Chaverim, one of the older rabbis, who was one of the earliest students of Shammai, Baba ben Buta Shmo, and his name was Baba ben Buta, okay, who was a very well-respected Talmid Chacham, despite the fact that he was from the school of Shammai. Shahaya Yodea, Shahalacha Kebeit Hillel, and he knew that in actuality the law was like Beit Hillel, namely that you could do smicha followed immediately by shchita in the Azara on the holiday itself. And what did he do? Vishalach vehevi, as we go over, right? Kol tzon kedar shebYerushalayim. And he sent out a message that all the quality sheep, tzon kedar, okay? And Rashi's comment there is me'ulim hayu, that they were the top quality sheep in Jerusalem, right? Ve'amidam ba'azara, and he had them placed in the temple courtyard. Va'amar, and he said, Kol mi sherotzeh lismoch, yavo v'yismoch. Whoever wants to come and lay their hands on the animals, sheep, right, can do so. And therefore, as a result, says the Gemara, Voto hayom gavra yadan shel Beit Hillel v'kavu halacha kimotan. That day, Beit Hillel had the upper hand, so to speak, and they established the law according to them. V'lo haya sham adam she'ir'er b'davar klum. And there was no person who then made an error as in terms of anything that had to go on.
When he told them to come lay their hands on, he meant that they should take it immediately and sacrifice it.
Right, right.
And
In
they
other
had
words,
special-
following the practice of Beit Hillel, even though he had been a long-time student of Beit Shammai. Okay? So now the Gemara is going to bring us another maaseh, another incident. Shuv maaseh b'talmid echad mitalmidei Beit Hillel. Further, there was another incident, says the Gemara, with a student of the Academy of Hillel, sheheviu lato la'azara l'smoch aleha, that also brought his burnt offering to the temple compound, right, to put his hands on it. Matzu talmid echad mitalmidei Beit Shammai. And one of the Shammai students found him, Amarlo, and he said to the Hillel student, right, Mazo smicha, what are you doing with this laying on of hands? Amarlo, and the Hillel student responded back, Mazo shtika. Okay, why don't you mind your own business, so to speak? Okay, why don't you keep silent? In other words, what happened? Shatke b'nizifa. He silenced him with such a rebuke. Vahalach lo. And that Beit Shammai student went on his way. Now, Amar Abaye, says Abaye, Hilkach, therefore, Hai Tzurba Mirabanan, right? This rabbinic student, the student of Beit Hillel, the Amar Le Lechavre Milta, who said this thing to the other student, Lo lahadar le milta tfei mimai de amar le chavre. He did not say anything more than what his neighbor, his colleague, had said to him. Right? In other words, he did not go into any extensive debate with him. He didn't reprimand him with an extensive language. Right? The ihu amar le mazo smicha, because on the one hand, one said to him, what is this laying hands? V'kama hadar le, and he responded him, mazu shtika. What is this silence? In other words, why are you saying anything? So in other words, he handled this, Abaye is saying he handled the situation very appropriately. Okay, let's go on now with another Braita. Tanya, we learn in the following Braita. Amru lahem Beit Hillel Beit Shammai. So now we're going to see a whole series of back and forth, okay, between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai. And I'm suggesting that the reason it's brought here is to show a difference between the story we just had, where the student responded with a minimum answer, but nevertheless satisfied, versus getting into a whole back and forth debate, okay, which we're going to see. Okay, so here we go. The Braita tells us, Beit Hillel said to Beit Shammai, Uma b'makom she'asur lehedyat mutar legavoa, where is in a certain place where something is forbidden for a common person, it's permitted to be done for the Mizbeach, for Hashem. Makom shemutar lehedyat, a situation where it's permitted for the common person to do. Eino din shemutar legavoa. Shouldn't it also then be permitted for above, for heaven? In other words, if a person can do aliyah, do smicha for their animal, for their shlumim, right? Okay, and which they're going to offer part of, and they're going to eat, so they're going to benefit. Then certainly, if you're bringing an olah, which is totally burnt for Hashem, shouldn't you be able to do smicha for that animal's offering as well? That's the implication. So Beit Shammai responds. Amru lahem Beit Shammai. Beit Shammai responds. Nidarim unidavot yochichu. The example of voluntary offerings or gift offerings should be proof. Shemutar lehedyat va'asur legavoa. That's permitted for a common person, but it's prohibited to do so when the individual brings it for on the Yom Tov. Amru lahem Beit Hillel. So Beit Hillel responds back. Ma'ale nedarim unidavot she'ein kavua lahem zman. Whereas voluntary offerings don't have a fixed time when they are to be brought. Okay, which really is in other words, they don't have to be brought on a particular holiday, a particular occasion. There's flexibility. Okay, Tomar ba'olat re'iyah. What will you say in regards to the burnt offering that has to be brought as a visual sign of being present for the holiday? Shekavua lo zman. That has a fixed time, that it has to be brought on the holiday itself. Beit Shammai responds, Amru lahem Beit Shammai. And they responded back, Afzo ein kavua lazman. Even that doesn't have a fixed time. Titznan, because we learn elsewhere in a Mishnah, Mi shelo chag b'yom tov rishon, one who did not have the opportunity to bring an offering to celebrate the holiday on the first day, right? Yom Tov Rishon Shel Chag. Okay? Chogeg v'holech kol haregel kulo. Okay, if he couldn't bring it on, let's say, first day of Sukkot, right, as we're appropriate time, right, to say learn this, he could bring it the rest of the holiday. He could bring that same offering on the Chol HaMoed days, the Yom Tov Acharon Shel Chag, and he could even bring it on Shmini Atzeret in that situation. So again, another response. Amru lahem Beit Hillel. They respond, Af zo kavua lazman. But even there, we have a fixed time.
He missed his chance. He missed his chance.
Right? Because why? Because the Mishnah tells us, Avar haregel v'lo chag, if the holiday in total has passed and he did not celebrate with the appropriate holiday offering, eino chayav ba'achriyuto. He no longer has the obligation, okay, to bring it. In other words, he blew the opportunity. Now what happens? Again, Beit Shammai responds, Amru lahem Beit Shammai. And Beit Shammai says, V'halo kfar ne'emar lachem. But don't we have a pasuk that says the holiday is for you, v'lo ligvoa, and not for on high? Okay? Again, the response, Amru lahem Beit Hillel. They respond, V'halo kfar ne'emar lashem. Okay, it also, the pasuk says the holiday is for Hashem. Kol de la Hashem, all that which is for Hashem. In Cain, matam with lomar lachem. What then is the purpose of the pasuk that says it's supposed to be for you, lachem velo lekutim, lachem velo leklavim, that offering must be for you and not for non-Jews. Okay, okay, for you and not for dogs. In other words, you have to use it for a appropriate offering. So that's that discussion. Now we get to another new piece. Ama Abba Shaul, Omra Bilashon Acheret. Abba Shaul made reference to this debate between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai in another manner. And he said it as follows. Uma b'makom shekiratcha stuma, whereas in a situation where your stove is closed, kirat ravcha ptucha, the stove of your master is open. Okay? In other words, you can't bring the offering, okay, but an offering for Hashem can be brought. B'makom shekiratcha ptucha, in a situation where your stove is open, eino din shekirat ravcha ptucha. Is it not logical then that the stove of your master should be open? V'chein badin shelo yehe shulchancha malei v'shulchan ravcha rekan. And in like manner, it's logical, right, that it should not be that you're not going to have a situation where your table is going to be full and the table of your master is going to be empty. So therefore, what are Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai actually arguing about? Mar savar nidarim unidavot krevin biyomto. That one master holds, right, that voluntary offerings, gift offerings, can be offered on the holiday. Umar savar ein krevin biyomto. And the other master holds that you cannot offer them on Yom Tov. Amar Rav Huna. And so Rav Huna responds and says, Ledivrei ha'omer nedarim u'nedavot ein krevin biyom tov. According to the one who says that voluntary and gift offerings can't be brought on Yom Tov, lo tema midoraita machzeh chazu. Don't say that it comes from the Torah, that this is suitable. V'rabanan hu degazrei bo. But that was the rabbis who decreed this. Gezerah shema yisheh. Okay, a decree lest someone delay. Ela afilu midoraita nami lo chazu. But even from the Torah, we say that they are not suitable. Right? Why? The high shtei halechem. Why? Because we see the example of the two loaves that are brought on Shavuot, right? The shtei halechem, the chovat hayom ninhu, that they are an obligation of that holiday, that day. Veleka lemigzar shema yisheh. And there we see, okay, that there is no decree lest one delay. Ve'eno doche lo et Shabbat, lo et Yom Tov. And therefore, it does not put it off either for Shabbos or on a Yom Tov. Okay? Implying then that yes, Nidarim and Nidavot were acceptable to be brought on a Yom Tov. Okay, so now we get to one new piece again. Ibayalahu. So now they ask the following shaila. V'divrei ha'omer nidarim and nidavot ein krevin biyom tov. According to the one who said that you cannot bring voluntary offerings and offer them on the holiday, avar v'shachat mai. If someone nevertheless went ahead and transgressed, right, and he went and slaughtered the animal on the holiday. What's the status, right? Rabba Amar, he says what? Zoreket hadam al minat lahatir basar ba'achila, that we still sprinkle the blood, okay? And for the purpose being so that that meat may be eaten. Okay? Rabba Amar, okay, so Rabbas Bar Rav Huna gives a different answer. Amar Zoreket hadam Almanat lahaktir imurin la'erev. We sprinkle the blood so that we can bring the portions that have to be brought on the mizbeach, okay, for that evening. My benayu. What's the difference between their two explanations? Ika benayu nitma basar o she'ibed. What is the difference is if the meat becomes tameh or the meat became lost, right? Namely, l'rava, lo zorek. If that's the answer is if you take the explanation of Rava, therefore you can't sprinkle the blood. The Rabba bar Rav Huna zarik. But if you take the explanation of Rabba bar Huna, okay, it would be permissible to still sprinkle the blood, okay? Right? Why? Because of course you're not using it till later simply for the mizbeah. Okay. May tive. But we have a challenge now. Following, right? Kivsei atzeret. Let's take those animal offerings, right? That were brought on Shavuot. Sheshachtan shalo lishman. And they were slaughtered not for their appropriate purpose. O sheshachtan bein lifnei zmanan, bein lachar zmanan. Right? Or they were slaughtered before their appropriate time or after their appropriate time. Hadam yizorek v'habasar ye'ochem. We have a writer that says that the blood should be sprinkled and the meat can be eaten. V'im haita Shabbat, but were it to be Shabbos, lo yizrok, one shouldn't sprinkle. V'im zarak, and if they did sprinkle, what happens? We'll go over just a small amount. Hurtza, it is acceptable. Almanat lahaktir emurin la'erev, in order to permit the offering of the portions at night. Im zarak diavad, in. If he sprinkled it after the fact, yes. Lechatchila lo. Initially not. Bishlema la Rabba. That's acceptable to Rabba. Necha. That seems fine. Ela la Rabba bar Rav Huna kasha. But for the explanation of Rabba bar Huna, that's problematic. Okay? So what happens? Okay, just to finish up, kasha. Indeed, it's a problem. Ve'bayat ema. And if you want, I could say as follows: Shani Shavut Shabbat. There is a difference regarding rabbinically defined aspects of prohibition of work on Shabbos, Mishavut Yom Tov. Okay, in the temple, between rabbinically defined aspects of prohibited work on Yom Tov in the temple. And that's where we'll stop right there.
More stringent with Shabbat than with festivals.
Yeah, absolutely. More stringent with Shabbat than they are on Yom Tov. Okay? But even with that, remember we said there really is no Shvut in the Beis HaMikdash as well. Right? Okay? Very good. All right, so everybody
Yom Tov, everybody.
have a good Yom Tov. Yeah, take care. Stay well, everybody.
All the best.
Okay. All right, let me see if I can go
Let me
back.
ask you a question.
Yeah.
Has nothing to do with this. Does Bishul Akum include anything you cook at all, even on the stove top? You just fry something?
That's a good question. I'm really not sure. I would think that in others, if a Gentile cooked it, it could very well be including that. Unless the question is, let's say, if you were to put on light on for that person, say you have an aide,
Yeah. I'm talking about it. This is going on in my house. You
Yeah.
have an aide.
right? And the aide does the cooking for you. But say you're able to transfer the fire, okay? Or
Well,
But-
right now, if she puts anything in the oven, I turn the oven on.
right. So the same
But I
thing.
don't do the same thing on top of the stove.
Okay, so I would do the same thing on the top of the stove. And then it's not considered, once you put on the fire, it's not considered bishulakum anymore. Uh-huh.
Just that when she's really cooking something for later, I put in the stove usually.
Okay.
She's doing something, instantaneously, or what she. It's a short order stuff.
Uh-huh. You're just heating stuff up that's purchased for you.
Well, no, I'm not making, like, make fried eggs.
Uh-huh.
That's bishulakum too. I don't imagine so. Well, Uncle made it. All right. Have a good Yom Tov.
Okay, you too. All right. Okay, let me get the door. All right. Dedicated meal, yes, and coffee along with that. And those let's call it the parking lots. are delayed.
Yeah, like everything, the supply.
You know, the supply line
Right.
because of COVID and
So,
everything.
yeah,
So certain things, so what they'll do is hopefully at some point in October, it will be
converted.
over. Then services will go into there and then they're gonna do.
Then they're gonna redo this, then they're gonna open up this brew?
No, no.
Oh, it's just gonna stay as that.
See that, see that where the doors
Yeah.
are? The show will stay there. So the room next door. Yeah. I know. All right, okay.
I don't know how much I know because it's how it works.
Well, I'm gonna be with you. So it'll be just the three of us, I want him to just to know because I'm trying to hope that he will help handle some, just to go over the fact that, are we gonna use tickets like we used to? We're gonna need somebody to check people in or things like that. All right? Thank you. I know that it's on my heart and yeah.